The Square Ball Podcast.
Welcome to the show. The View from the Press Box with Phil Hay coming up in just a moment or two. Dan here from the Square Ball with a reminder that the show is brought to you in association with, powered by West Yorkshire Electrical, wyelectrical.co.uk for details. They're also on your socials. Solar panel installation, battery storage, EV charging, fire alarm systems, school contracting, test and inspection works, both for your home and your business, with finance available for work on your home and your business. They do the lot. If it's got wires, they work with it. wyelectrical.co.uk for details. Phil, the Monday show where we catch up on the weekend, we created danger for ourselves, jeopardy, when we tried to predict the team lineup going into Peterborough, which was just as much an exercise in fun as anything else, wasn't it? Because we predicted that off the back of the Birmingham game, same day it was, wasn't it? And we predicted Spence at right back. It wasn't Spence at right back. It was Jamie Shacks, and we saw Archie Gray moved into midfield as well. So all change on that front. I guess we can talk about Spence, I guess, in the second half of the show. Let's reflect on the game first of all, shall we? And a day out at London Road, or the Western Homes Stadium as it is now. How was it for you from the press box?
Well, talking of jeopardy, I mean, that is the FA Cup, really, isn't it? And the average team probably comes away from that game yesterday, 3-0 win at Peterborough, thinking, well, you know, that's what you do in the third round. That's how you handle it. That's how you manage it. But I was saying afterwards that performance and result like that from Leeds is not to be sniffed at, because we've seen so many FA Cup debacles over the years, and particularly away from home, that in no way was that a gimme of a draw for Leeds, in spite of the fact that pound for pound and man for man, it was a game that they should have won. I mean, to put it simply, they've made a mess of, you know, far more easy draws than that. I think Peterborough away. Peterborough having a good season in League One, and I think you could see in their performance that they are a good team at that level, but there was a definite gulf between the two sides. It just so happened that Leeds didn't score early on when they were on top, and then did score the first goal at the point where Peterborough seemed to have settled. But from 1-0 onwards, I think you got the feeling that it was a top-end Championship club against a capable but limited League One side. So a very good win. And the goal of Bamford's life from him in the second half, I think I would go as far as saying that probably the best goal a lot of us have ever seen in the flesh, no?
Absolutely. In terms of the matchup, Daniel Farker was pleased with it, wasn't he? We'll hear his comments now when he was speaking to Bryn Law on the club's official YouTube channel.
Yes, I'm really happy with this win, because we played a guy who's sitting in the top position in League One. And if you're sitting in the top position, you have Championship quality. We all are seeing what Ipswich is doing, who played last season in League One. And they played with confidence, just good results in the recent weeks. They had nothing to lose, excited home crowd. They played their best starting 11. It was a game on Championship level. And then to win this game comfortably with a clean sheet win with 3 goals, also really good performance. I'm quite happy. We were also able to rest a few players, were able to give some valuable minutes away. So for us, a perfect day today. And the most important is we are in the next round. This is what we wanted. This is what we are. And so I'm a happy man today.
Into the next round, and Farker there describing it as a perfect day. Would you agree, in terms of getting minutes into the legs, being able to make a few changes, the clean sheet, the full shebang?
Yeah, I think, you know, over the years, I can't think of many instances where losing early in the FA Cup or the League Cup has particularly helped Leeds. And I don't think it ever does them any good to lose games that they should be winning. I know there was a bit of frustration at the club after the defeat to Crawley in 2021, because that felt like an occasion where, with Premier League position in such good condition, and Leeds looking like they were not already safe at that point, but very close, that was an opportunity to have a good go at the competition and to have a bit of a run. But I think more specifically, I always remember somebody senior saying to us on the pitch at Newport after that defeat under Christensen, that the team that Christensen had picked on the day, you just couldn't afford to go with that lineup at a ground like that and away to a team like that. They were too exposed. There were too many changes. It was too unsettled. Farker seemed to get it right yesterday, able to give players who needed minutes some minutes, able to mix the team up, to rest a couple of players who needed to come out, but without doing it in a way which completely disrupted the flow and didn't leave them with enough quality on the pitch to win the tie in the end. I think it was quite notable, though, that, again, Ethan Ampadu in at centre-back when there were other alternatives there. You know, Liam Cooper, Charlie Creswell, who didn't travel again, and probably worth a bit of discussion from us, not for the first time, because his future does seem a bit difficult to put your finger on at the moment, given the fact that yesterday felt like the sort of game that he would absolutely have been involved in, you would have thought. But Ampadu feels more and more to me like, the key figure in Farke's dressing room from Farke's perspective. That's 29 starts on the bounce for him now. He's been used in the League Cup. He's been used in the FA Cup. The opportunities to rest him have never been taken. He seems happy to be playing. I have to say, we spoke to him afterwards and I said, convention in modern football is that you don't play every game now, that you do rotate, that players get a rest, that the fixture list is too congested, there are too many games and players don't like the way the schedule falls. But he said, in his earlier years when he was at Chelsea and going out on loan, he had periods where he didn't get many minutes. And actually, this is how he'd want it to be, where you are getting played every single week. But I do think, there's a big contrast there between Ampadu, who Farke clearly trusts to the point of playing him in every single game, and you see how far that trust will extend. And then the scenario with Spence, where, he's gone midway through a loan and you're looking at a very good right back who clearly is just not for Farke at this stage, heading back to Spurs, having not contributed as much as anybody would have wanted.
What did you make of Richard Creswell's comments on the eve of the game? Again, it's all done via socials. Richard Creswell, of course, being Charlie Creswell's dad, but also significantly his agent as well, complaining about the lack of minutes. He'd like to see his son play again sometime. Natural frustration, or was that a little bit of overspill in your mind?
It might have been overspill, yeah, but definite frustration there. And in my experience, these things don't tend to go unnoticed by coaches or coaching staff. I mean, Farke didn't allude to it yesterday and actually didn't say anything about it at all when we asked him. We got on to Creswell after the Birmingham game when he'd said that he'd wanted a more attacking bench, which is why Creswell hadn't been involved. Said that on the one hand they do really rate Creswell and he's got a long contract, but evidently is not playing him and is not using him and didn't take him in the squad to Peterborough yesterday. And against the League One side, when it comes down to players who need minutes, Creswell seemed to fall into that category. So you've got this contradiction really of someone who Farke says he rates but seems to be a long way from the picture. And I don't think it's much of a secret that Creswell would like to be playing more. I don't think it's much of a secret that, given that there is ample loan interest in him, that he would like to go out if he isn't going to play. But the message, and I said this a few weeks ago, the message to him and to Joe Gelhardt has been that they're needed and they're not available and that Leeds don't want to lose them. Whether or not that stance holds, and again, I've said this a few times, interests me because, you do wonder whether these things will come to a head as the window goes on. But yeah, I mean, in terms of Richard Creswell's tweet or his Instagram post in particular, as I say, clubs and coaching staff tend to pick up on these things. I suspect Richard will already have known at the point where he posted that Charlie wasn't going to be in the squad. But either way, it probably doesn't help.
Just returning to Ethan Ampadu, then a fine day for him, trebling his goals tally for his career now, and we'll hear actually the comments that Farke made about him and his demands for more goals from the midfield.
I think it was his first and second goal in the senior level for Ethan. I'm always holding the pressure high that he needs to score goals. So I'm happy for him. Yeah, he deserves it. He's so great and so valuable for us. But it's also important that my midfielders or defensive players chip in also with goals, sometimes out of set pieces. Ethan scored today too out of set pieces is why I'm always on it and talk to my defensive players, because sometimes you have to open a game or to bury a game even with a set piece. And delighted for Ethan and hope makes him even more greedy to keep going also in order to score goals.
Goals from midfield, Phil?
There aren't many coming this season, are there? But then again, I think if you're signing Ampadu in search of goals, you're not really looking at his track record. One before yesterday, which was for Spezia in Spain in a Serie A relegation playoff. The only goal he's ever scored at first team level prior to Peterborough away. And I think when you have his sort of goal scoring record, you need the type of chance that fell to him in the first half. You know, that almost can't miss opportunity where in slightly strange circumstances, because of what went on in the build up to that chance, he was left kind of thinking, well, I might as well stick this in. But that, yeah, won a couple of moments of controversy. That it seemed to us that the whistle went as Jayden Anthony was running up to take the free kick. I would need to look back and watch back really closely to see exactly when the whistle did sound. I think Peterborough's perspective was that it hadn't gone at all before Anthony struck the ball. We felt as if it had gone just as he was about to hit it. But one way or the other, it made Peterborough freeze. And, Bamford's kind of semi-knockdown was, I think, a bit of an indication that he didn't really know what was going on either. But it had the effect of giving Ampadu a tap-in. I don't think that was any more controversial, particularly than the penalty decision soon after on Nonto. I think that has to be a penalty. And it falls into that category of decisions where it can't be both. It can't be not a foul and it can't be not a dive. It has to be one or the other, because quite clearly defender didn't get a touch on the ball and everybody could see that. Watching it back, the replay in real time, I thought it was definitely a penalty. Watching it back, people made the point that, it's Nonto's trailing leg that gets caught. But at the same time, I think that penalty gets given 9 times out of 10, and I think it should have been.
Our Rob mentioned on the match ball that there were tweets doing the rounds suggesting that somebody in the crowd had blown a whistle, which might have confused everybody in the run-up to that free kick.
It came from 5 Live, that I think, who was because very soon after, right in front of us, there was somebody who was thrown out or taken out of the main stand, who we assumed was a Leeds supporter, because as before, the tradition that tends to be lower league grounds with Leeds is that you get a lot of Leeds fans in, or a certain number of Leeds fans in the home end, and again they had one full stand and half of the stand that we were in yesterday, so a big away following. Our assumption at that time was that it was a Leeds fan being ejected from that area. 5 Live did suggest, I saw a message on their blog, that a whistle had been blown from that area. But again, those of us sitting in the press box were discussing that. We didn't hear it at the time. It seemed to us more a case that the whistle went after Anthony had started his run-up, and I think Peterborough's view was that on that basis he should have been asked to retake it. But I would have to watch back and listen really closely to see whether or not the ball was struck before the whistle was blown, because it was close.
Yeah, 4,000 away fans for that one, which was, Farke praised them in the post-match again, didn't he? And always in fine fettle when you travel in those sorts of numbers to a smaller ground, particularly a League One. What did you make of it from the press box?
It was a really good atmosphere. It was a good crowd, and I think if you go in those numbers for a third round tie, you're chuffed to bits if you get a goal like Bamford's in the second half. I mean, he does have very good technique when it comes to striking the ball, Bamford, despite everything and despite the chances he misses. When he finishes cleanly and when he finishes sweetly, I'm thinking again of the goal that sealed his hat-trick away at Aston Villa in the Premier League. That's what he can do. And that finish made a bit of a mockery of the old story about him when he was at Crystal Palace. It took Palace a while to realise that he was actually left-footed, because that's a stronger foot. That was the clean strike yesterday. Everything about it was just exquisite, really. And it's not even just the swivel and the hit. It's the way in which the ball has to be controlled, and the fact that when he's chesting it down, he's off the floor. Incredibly difficult chance. I was asking our data guys today, what was the XG on that opportunity, and they said that unfortunately, with it being Peterborough, nobody was particularly studying it closely enough to be able to give exact details. But a few of the lads in our office were saying if you were somewhere down at about 0.01 XG for that chance, you wouldn't be far off.
Not bad, and that's pretty much what Farke said. Here are his comments in the aftermatch interviews.
Patrick's goal was quite all right. That's right. Of course, it was a world-class goal. We don't have to talk about it. But the whole world is praising Patrick right now, so he doesn't need me right now to praise him. So for me, I'm more concentrated on what he's giving to the team. And after difficult starting to the season, was important that he's back on track right now. Also in training, working hard, coming into his rhythm. Important minutes also for him today, and the most important topic for him is always that he stays fit, that his body works, and then he keeps going. And obviously also goals are always priceless for the confidence of my offensive players. Quite happy that Patrick is in such a good situation back again.
Nice to see him heading back towards fitness and form again, Patrick Bamford, because it's been proper hit and miss for him, hasn't it?
To say the least. I think there's a question for Farke now about what you do with him, because this is the best week he's had in a long, long time. I always say this, but fitness has been part of it, injury has been part of it, and that has stunted his ability to make an impact. And I think if you're kind of fair and objective about Bamford, well, absolutely accepting, some of the misses, some of the chances, some of the penalties have been extremely costly and in periods haven't been good enough. The 2 seasons where he's basically avoided injury, 1920 and 2021, were when he served up 16 and 17 goals, respectively. And that was what took him to his England debut in the summer of 2021. But it has been a downward slope for him since then. And it's it's developed into this scenario where it doesn't feel like Leeds are giving him much pleasure. It doesn't feel like he's given Leeds much pleasure either. And there's that sort of frustration between the crowd and him, or that has been there for quite a while. But I've always looked at Bamford as a confidence player. I think he is somebody who performs better, who looks better, body language looks better when he's got that flowing. And if you go back through his track record, without suggesting that the runs of goals that he gets on are really, really extensive and go on forever, he is a player who tends to score in bunches. They do tend to come in patches. So I think it was 6 or 7 in 8 in the Premier League season, 6 from 6 in the season when Leeds went up. As I say, it's not as if it's wildly prolific, and it's not as if it goes on indefinitely. But it does suggest to me that he's the sort of player that you need to try and cash in on in a competitive sense when he's kind of running hot. And, I suppose to cut to the chase, I think if you were Farke, you'd be very, very tempted to start him at Cardiff now at the weekend. Having not only scored against Birmingham, but played as he did against Birmingham. And I accept that Birmingham weren't great, and Rooney was sacked after that game, which I think made a lot of sense on the basis of their form and also the performance on the day. And also you're talking about a League One side in Peterborough. But I just think he'll have his tail up now, and he will be a little bit full of it in the way that he needs to be. And I think if you're going to make something of Bamford this season properly, this is where you have to kind of really back him. And I think, again, to go back to Spence a little bit, and I spoke about the way in which Farke seems to be investing a huge amount in Ampadu. There's also been a big reluctance on Farke's part to kind of push the narrative, because he's been asked about this at several press conferences, but push the narrative that Bamford's unhappy, or, doesn't want to be here, unproductive, or that, he's got nothing left to offer. Always been very complimentary and always been very positive about him when we've asked. And has now given him this opportunity to play, which has paid off. And as I say, it would seem to me to be a slightly odd decision that, having got a player into a bit of form who's desperately been looking for form for a long time, you decide not to use him in the weekend that follows. Because to be quite honest, up to this point, certainly under Farke this season, he hasn't looked like much of an impact sub to me.
Did you get much in the way of decent comments from Darren Ferguson in the post-match? Because not a lot has been reported since. I just wondered how he had taken the defeat, because we have seen historically that he's not been best pleased when Leeds have gone there and won.
You'd love to know. We didn't get to speak to, or I didn't get to speak to Ferguson, because we were in the middle of Farke. We were just waiting for Farke to come over and do his turn. Peterborough didn't yesterday have a press room for us to use, so it was all done pitch side, which means that it's all a bit ad hoc. So we were speaking to Farke and then speaking to Ampadu. Quite honestly, Ferguson's view on it, I'm not entirely sure about. I think he will almost certainly, I would imagine, have griped about the first goal. Although, as I say, I think Peterborough got very lucky with the penalty decision. I don't think I'd be especially unhappy with that performance from Peterborough. I think once they settled after difficult opening spell, they looked pretty good, but there was definitely a gulf, and you could see that the superior players were in Farke's camp. And it was a deserved win. It was comprehensive, and as I say, not a mean feat, because Leeds have made a right meal of games like this several times in the past. It was
almost strange in the simplicity with which the victory came, wasn't it? Really, quite jarring given I was going to say our recent history. I'm thinking probably the last 20 to 25 years, probably.
Well, as I say, if you take Bamford's goal out of that and replace Leeds with, the kind of average top-end Championship side or Premier League side, then it would be very little to write home about, would it? It would just have been standard FA Cup fixture. But because Leeds have been kind of source of entertainment for everybody else in this competition for so long, there is that bit of trepidation with these fixtures, and everybody knows the track record. But in the end, it was a final day, and I think the thing that will stick with me about the Bamford goal is the reaction of the other players around him. Like hands on their heads and mouths open. Everybody seemed to realise straight away. There were a few Peterborough fans in front of me who I'm sure will regret it now, but it was kind of like a bit of involuntary applause, because what else do you do? I think everybody realised at the time that it was really, really special. And as I say, absolutely deserved to go through. And just, people may be listening to this after the draw takes place, but we're still waiting for it now. And just that wait now to see whether or not it will be a 14th tie away from home.
Could well be. We shall see, won't we? It's a 50-50 shot, but it doesn't feel like a 50-50 shot, if you know what I mean. I know the odds of 14 consecutive aways are astronomical. We mentioned it on the match ball yesterday, but let's see what the heated balls deliver, shall we?
Well, surely if any result is going to break that run and any performance is going to break that run, it was yesterday's.
Well, indeed. It's a nice distraction, actually, as much as we were sort of questioning heading into this. Is the FA Cup a bit of a distraction? And it seems to be a conversation we have every single year. And you know, depending on the draw for the fourth round, it may prove to be so, because the Norwich game's going to get rearranged, isn't it, now, as a result of winning over the weekend. It's still nice to keep that momentum going, to come off the back of 1-3-0 win with another one.
I think the one thing I'm conscious of with the fixture list, not so much the odd FA Cup tie dropping into it, but it's the amount of travelling that Leeds are about to start doing. The fixture list away from home is particularly severe when it comes to distances. You know, Cardiff, Bristol City, Swansea, Plymouth, all of those before the middle of February. And I think this spell now is going to be a good test of whether or not Farke can get a grip of the results away from home and can address the issues that we've been talking about, can make the away form kind of marry up a little bit more closely to what has been excellent run of results at home. But it is going to be extremely demanding this period. And I hope people have got their air miles vouchers.
Just returning to the chat about Spence, which is where we kicked off the show there. He has obviously gone back to Spurs. Doesn't reflect well on him, does it? And I know Farke kept his powder dry up to a point in what he said. He was very sort of genial in his first answer about Spence, but then later on in the press conference, he returned to the topic when questioned further and spoke about professionalism and things like that. So, you know, reading between the lines, and it doesn't take a genius to do so, there was obviously some sort of issue there that meant Farke just wasn't having a bar of it.
He said enough. I think in the end it was easy to read between the lines and to understand that Spence's performance, be it in matches or in training or around the training ground, you know, general attitude, general demeanour was just not what Farke wanted in the camp. Nobody at the club has said whether there was a specific issue which led to a blow up or led to, you know, a kind of forthright decision to terminate the deal. But I think it's worth remembering as well that he won't have been a particularly cheap loanee from Tottenham at all. And it seems to me that with Spence, if you go back through his career, he had a very, very good season at Forest, which I think proved him to be an extremely good footballer. And I did think when you watched him play that you could see real flashes of the sort of natural talent that he has. But equally, you have to think of the game away at Blackburn. You remember the big debrief that Farke gave him on the pitch afterwards. We sat and watched that, and it went on for a good 60 to 90 seconds. And it did seem to be a bit of trying to make a point about game management and tracking back and everything else. Go further back from Forest to Middlesbrough, where Neil Warnock just wasn't having Spence at all, which is why he ended up at Forest on loan. And you can see that, well, you know, there was a manager in Steve Cooper who managed to get absolutely the best out of him. I think there are other managers who found him to be very, very hard work. And I suspect that Farke in the end falls into that category as well. It's unfortunate, I think, that such a good player has made so little impact. And I do think that the injury he had right at the outset was kind of the worst possible start in terms of getting him going and getting him into a flow. But I think we're starting to see with Farke that he can be pretty ruthless, and there isn't an awful lot of messing about when it comes to, you know, who he rates, who he doesn't, who he has faith in, who he doesn't. As I say, you contrast Ampadu with Spence, and I think it tells you a story.
Will Leeds be in the hunt for another right back? We're seeing a lot of reports of Connor Roberts at Burnley being a target. Phil, left back, we mentioned Josh Doig in the run up to the Peterborough game. There are reports of David Brooks being linked at Bournemouth. Do you know where Leeds are sitting on this? Do you think they might be a little bit more active than perhaps we first thought?
Yeah, a few people have been telling us that they like Nico Williams at Forest as well, but I don't think there is much or any scope for Forest letting him out. He seems to be well in the plans of Nuno, or at least well rated by Nuno. It is very, very quiet, I have to say, on the transfer front at Leeds at the moment. And it was, you know, I did pick up on the quotes from Farke. I wasn't at the press conference last week, I was away, but him saying, you know, we're quite well covered at fullback. It doesn't really feel like that, I have to be honest, to look at the squad. It doesn't feel as if they're absolutely rock solid in those positions. And again, you would expect that there would be some strengthening there before the window closes. The noises from Bournemouth seem to be, you know, a bit inconclusive about whether Bournemouth really want Brooks to go. You'll have seen Leeds linked with Fabio Carvalho at Liverpool over the weekend, but it looks this morning like he'll be going to Hull. I think key decision for Liverpool on that front was how much time he was going to get on the pitch and how many minutes he was going to play. So we did ask Farke yesterday, was there anything brewing? Was there anything close? How was it all going? And he gave the impression that there was nothing really developed at the moment to the point where he would want to speak about it. So yeah, watch with interest. I think on the outgoings in the next sort of 24 hours or so, we'll see Eintracht Frankfurt agree a permanent contract with Robin Koch, which will kick in at the end of the season when his loan is up. He's out of contract with Leeds in the summer. Seems to have done well over there, or at least Eintracht Frankfurt seem to be very happy with him. So expecting pre-contract to get agreed there.
Quiet at the moment at Leeds doesn't necessarily mean they're not doing anything, does it? Because I know that people hear those words on like this show and then automatically go, well, they're not doing anything. They need to get their act in gear. It's possibly worth just stressing that, you are in as we said before, in the transfer window, it's a very dynamic situation, isn't it? And you can't force other clubs to let players go at this stage if they're not ready to do so. If they're waiting on options themselves, they're assessing their squads, they want to do something in another week or two. So it's not that they're not doing anything. It's just that there's nothing rumbling immediately at the moment. No,
and I mean, circumstances change. I mean, for instance, somebody was telling me that Carvalho hadn't fancied Burnley in the summer, wasn't a move that he thought would necessarily be good for him. But it, looks at the moment very close to dropping down into the Championship, and I guess it becomes, a case of being a little bit pragmatic, doesn't it? If you want to play and you do actually want minutes and you want games, and you've got your parent club saying to you need to be playing, then you need to be open-minded about what you go for. I think, and this is always the case in January, you have a kind of finite number of available players in this window. And obviously every window is finite in the sense that not everybody is for sale, but there tend to be fewer available at this time of year. And you do find, going back many, many years, that an awful lot of Championship clubs want exactly the same footballer, and that there is a very, very small pool who Championship clubs would take every day of the week. I think the key for Leeds at the end of this window is not to be seen to leave themselves short. That would be the criticism of them if they do. And I still don't think that vast amounts need to happen in this window. But I think it would be a concern if nothing of note occurred.
Do you think it's another interesting test of the 49ers ownership at this stage about whether they want to push on and try and get that promotion spot secured this season, or whether they view it as a 2-year project? Because what they do in this window will go a long way to indicating what their intentions are.
I think it will, although I don't think you can discount, and I know people hate hearing about this, but I don't think you can discount the influence of P&S either, and the fact that you do have spending limits in this division, and you've got to stay within them. I don't know exactly how much headroom they have. I don't know how much scope there is left to spend, but it won't be vast. And it isn't vast for most clubs in this division. But you're right. I mean, this is, as they will find out, this is the point that can make or break a season if you get it right. But as I've said before, they feel a bit more strategic than previous ownership groups, I think. The 49ers, more inclined to take a longer term view. But I don't doubt for a second that if there's a serious chance of going up this season, which there definitely is, then everybody would want to take it.
What would you do?
I would absolutely sign a left back without any question. More than anything, because the injuries have just started to creep in a little bit for Byram. And they don't seem like they're major, and they don't seem like they're extreme or likely to rule him out for any length of time. But I think you have to mitigate the risk that they do start to pile up slightly, and he does start to miss far more in the away games than he did in the first half of the season. I think I would be replacing Spence as well, because if Ayling isn't in favour, which he clearly isn't, it doesn't seem to me that there is necessarily a natural out-and-out right-back available. I know Shackleton can play there and play well, and I know Archie Gray has played there and played well, but it feels like you're playing them out of position. If there was an option, I would be tempted to do a 10 as well, but I am quite realistic about the ability to land that sort of player in this window. And I think also to land a player who you can promise minutes to because of what is already up front and what is already there. But yeah, I think defensively, that's where Farke has to be looking.
Nice one, Phil. Well, we'll get back together towards the end of the week, you, me and Michael, and we will preview Cardiff. So I'll speak to you then, all right?
Thank you.
See you in a bit.
The Square Ball Podcast.